Welcome to our Riley Blake Designs Building Blocks series. I'm Cindy Cloward, and I'm going to take you through step by step as we create this beautiful sampler quilt. And this is a great skill building quilt. So if you're a quilter, join us as we sew month by month these building blocks. But if you're new to quilting or sewing, we are so glad you're here. And we're going to take you through the easy to the little more challenging, one step at a time. So let's get started with our first quilt block, which is the friendship star, or known as the four-pointed star. It's an easy block to get started on. These are the supplies needed to create this block. To make this block, you first need to make your half square triangles. Let me show you how easy it is to do. So you're going to take two of your colored blocks and you're going to mark them in the center, corner to corner. So you can use a marking tool. I'm just simply using a mechanical pencil. Use your ruler, mark it corner to corner on two of your blocks. Then you get the same size white block and put it underneath your colored block. Now that's lined in. I usually throw a pin in there. You don't have to, but to get it from to the machine without shifting, you can toss a pin in. Now this marked line is not your sewing line. It's what you line your foot up 1/4 inch on each side, and you're going to sew one down. You're going to sew down one side and sew back down on the other side using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to create 2 blocks at a time. Let's take it to the machine and sew. Okay, I've chain pieced this together. Just going to take out my pins. Cut my threads in between. And now your marking line is going to be your cutting line. You can use scissors, but of course a rotary cutter is quick and easy to cut right down the center. Now take it to your pressing station. You can open up, and now you've got 4 half square triangles. Kind of just set my stitches. Sometimes I do a group of pressing at a time all together like that. And then I'm going to open up your half square triangle just like that. As it cools, I like to put my quilter's clapper on there. It absorbs the heat. And if I'm using steam, moisture, but I'm just using a hot iron. I'm going to grab my rotating mat to trim up my blocks. These have cooled a bit, have nice crisp seams. And now we need to square up our block. We have these Lori Holt square up rulers. They're really great to trim your block to the size that you want, which is 4.5 inches. So you line that up, the center marking on the center of your sew line, your seam. And these rotating mats are just fantastic. I'm going to put these off to the side to rotary cut, especially small blocks. And this was designed by Sue Daly. So take a look at that. That's a perfectly squared up block. And you're going to repeat that on each of the remaining blocks. I'm going to throw away my scraps. Move this down here. And we're ready to start assembling our block. We've previously cut out these blocks that are already 4.5 inches. And let's lay out our pieces together. We know that we have a 4.5 inch pink square in the middle. And then around our quilt block, we are making our friendship star or 4-pointed star. I think I like the name Friendship Star the best. We got all of our half square triangles going the right way. And then in the remaining 4 corners, we just have a solid white fabric. So here it is, ready to sew together. I sew a section at a time, and I'm going to sew this middle section to the outside section. Let me show you what I mean. I flip it over, right sides together, lining them up, and I put a pin at the top. Now, if you're new to sewing, you might want to put one in the middle and even at the bottom. But by putting a pin at the top, I know where I'm starting my sewing, and I go down from top to bottom. And it helps me keep track of the direction I'm sewing. But you can play with pinning, see what works for you. It is important to keep your blocks lined up so they don't shift. And these design boards are excellent to move it to the machine so things aren't moving around as you're walking to your machine. So I'm going to take this first block and I'm going to chain piece all 3 sections using my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I've got my chain piece here, and I'm not going to clip my threads between my units, and I'm going to show you why, because I want them to still stay together. So I'm opening this up, and I'm choosing not to press at this point, and I'm going to sew my last section to my middle. Again, I'm going to throw a pin in the top. Pin as much or as little as you'd like. In the early days of quilting, I'd pin everything. Now I can use less pins as I go along. Okay, let's take it to the machine and sew. Okay, so we have this all chain pieced, and you can see that we've got our 3 rows, our 3 units all sewn together, and it's all held together by the threads. So I'm still not going to clip the threads. You don't need to at this point. And I'm going to flip the top over to the middle section. Now this is why I haven't pressed, because I'm going to decide which way I want my seams to go. Because I want my seams to, you know, nest, or I use the word nestle together, which means my top seams are going to go one direction, my bottom seams are going to go another. So see how those nest together just like that. And I kind of finger press them like that. They just kind of lock into place. I put a pin in there. And I'm going to pin a little bit more on the outside here. So this seam is going to go towards the center. I'm going to push this seam towards the center as well. And then the top seams are going to go to the outside. See how I just nest those seams? Just like that. Let's take a machine and sew. Let's bring it back. Take a look at that. Those line up just like that. Because we just nestled our seams just right. We just are going to repeat that same thing here. That center section is going to go towards the center like that. We're going to nest our seams. Taking a moment on this step will give you great results on lining up your points and all your sections together. Okay, we have finished our block. Now we just need to press and square it up. So I'm going to take it over to my pressing station. And before I do that, normally I don't press on the back side, but I'm just kind of making sure my seams are going the right way, the direction I want them to go. Let me give this a little spritz. Open it up, press it out just like that. Sometimes I get to ironing instead of leaving my iron pressing for a minute. You get better results the longer you press in a section. So there we go. Works even better with this clapper. Again, I'm just going to give that a little spritz. I want my seams to go a certain direction back, so I'm just kind of pressing those. Just doing a quick iron over that. I fold it over. Take my iron from the center and I kind of press out to the edges. And a lot of times they tell you to lift up your iron, especially if your fabric's wet, because you don't want to stretch your fabric. That's why pressing is a little different than ironing. I'm just going to press one more section. And I think it's almost ready to go. I'll take my clapper. Take a look at that. So our block is ready to be squared up. We have our square up rulers. This is 12.5 inch. And the design on this is meant to show you where your 1/4 inch seam allowance is. So anything outside of this is going to be caught up in your seam. So what you want to look at, so you want to center this in your block, is that all your points are inside this blue line, and they won't get cut off with your seam. And we know all of our measurements, if we sew accurately, we shouldn't have to trim up much. But again, we're not perfect, so sometimes you have to trim up a little bit, but make sure to not trim off your points. So mainly I just have a few little threads on the outside. It looks pretty good. Looking at it all. Yep. One more side. Take a look. And you have this grid pattern, and you can just line up all your blocks on the grid. And you can see where, if there's an adjustment you need to do in your sewing, this is where you can note how you're doing on your sewing. And your block is finished. Congratulations on making your friendship star. Join us next time as we create our second block in this series, our square and square block, or you may know it by the economy block.